Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. My name is Peter Warda with the Santa Cruz Valley Chamber of Commerce, and I'm pleased to welcome you all. Before we get started, as always, just want to make a couple of quick announcements. As you know, you can always find our upcoming events on our events page by visiting scvchamber.com and then hover over the events tab. You'll see a drop down that shows upcoming events. So we always encourage people to make sure they're checking that page, seeing what we've got coming up and registering for them. As you've seen, we're pleased to announce the return of our annual State of the County event. This event will take place on Wednesday, July 28th at 4 p.m. If you haven't checked out, we're really excited about this year's format. We're headed to Six Flags Magic Mountain for the event, so it should be a really exciting time. Reach out to me directly if you are looking to sponsor the event, or you can visit our event page if you just wanted to purchase a ticket. But again, reach out to me if your company is looking to sponsor. Or you can email hello@scvchamber.com. We do monitor that email directly, and we'll be able to get you all the information that you need. With that, just as a reminder, we do have a Q&A session at the end of this presentation, but please feel free to submit your questions through the questions control panel and throughout the presentation, and then we'll be able to get to as many questions as we can. So right now, I'd like to introduce our Nonprofit Council Chair and President and CEO of the Santa Cruz Valley Economic Development Corporation, Ms. Holly Schroeder. Holly?
Great. Thanks, Peter. Pleasure to be here today, and very excited about the presentation that we have for you. This is our second webinar. We're doing quarterly webinars for the Nonprofit Council, and pleased to bring you some information about fundraising today. As you all know, Santa Cruz Valley has a very strong philanthropic community with more than 100 local-based nonprofit organizations helping our community thrive and really helping our community throughout the past year. Our nonprofits are a key reason why Santa Cruz is a great community, and we're always looking forward to better and better for our residents and our future. The Nonprofit Council's mission is to provide business resources for our local nonprofit leaders to help them connect, grow, and learn about valuable information so that they can successfully meet their organization's mission and goals. We achieve this by bringing nonprofit leaders together to receive information designed for professional growth and to learn about the latest nonprofit trends and regulatory issues facing the sector. We connect nonprofit leaders to our local businesses to create new relationships and partnerships that help the nonprofits achieve their mission. So today's session is going to be on fundraising, and we're going to be pleased to have Joan, who I'll introduce in just a moment. But I also wanted to highlight a money-saving opportunity that many of our nonprofits may not be aware of. And the Economic Development Corporation did a webinar with the Chamber on this in the past couple of weeks. And this is about the Employee Retention Tax Credit. It is a tax credit that is available for nonprofits. Many nonprofits think that they are not eligible for programs like this because they are exempt from income tax. This relates to payroll tax. So if you have employees, this is a tax credit that you may want to look at. It's been very much a moving target. We have a webinar. It is up on the EDC YouTube page, so if you want to re-watch that webinar, but it has to do with what were your declines in revenues between 2020 and 2019 and 2021 and 2019. And so there's some of the standards there on the screen. And if you go to the next slide, Peter, you just want to make sure people realize that they are eligible for this. And we're seeing company or nonprofits such as hospitals, schools, museums. For example, if you were shut down or couldn't do your activities because of that, you are eligible for this tax credit. So if you have 10 or more employees, this is something you should really take a look at. And at the bottom of the screen there, Sue Ariano, who is our Director of Business Assistance, is available to help you identify whether or not this is something relevant to your nonprofit and whether or not you want to explore this further with an expert. So whoever on your board or in your relationships helps with your 990 filings might be somebody you want to talk to about this. Again, many of our nonprofits don't realize that they're eligible because they are exempt from income tax. But again, this deals with your payroll tax, and it can be quite a sizable tax credit, depending on how many employees you have and what your circumstances were. So really want to commend to people to take a look at this. And now back to our regular program. Just wanted to let people realize that these are out there. Back to today, which is about fundraising. And we are joined by Joan Ford, who is a nonprofit fundraiser as her profession. And so while COVID changed our world for good, it's been brutal for many of our nonprofit organizations. Many closed, some have merged, others are doing well and seeing more demand. The ones that are doing really well have secrets to their fundraising. And so during this webinar, we're going to find out how your nonprofit can strengthen their fundraising and improve their chances of doing well here. So a bit of background about our speaker. Joan Ford, as I said, is a nonprofit fundraiser who will help get your fundraising on track efficiently, effectively, and at a minimal cost. She has a 20-year track record of fundraising success and more than 15 years of executive nonprofit experience. Joan understands the challenges nonprofits face and the pressures to raise funds while also managing costs. She works collaboratively with the board, CEO, and staff on an interim or on a contract basis. Joan has successfully raised funds through events, grants, direct mail and email campaigns, online auctions, major gifts, corporate partnerships, and grants. And so, Joan, I want to thank you for joining us today. We look forward to your words of wisdom and your experience. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And, you know, hopefully we'll have a little fun in the process, because some of this work in nonprofit, I think, is really, really gut-wrenching, especially right now. And I think you have to have a sense of humor and a little bit of fun. So before we get started, I have a little poll that Peter's going to put up, and I'm hoping to find out how many of you are involved with nonprofits. So it asks you if you, Peter, if you want to put it up, if you are sitting on the board. But what I really want to know is, are you sitting on the board or working at a nonprofit? So if you can just go ahead and take the poll, and then once we have your responses, and do we have the poll completed and the responses?
So we're about 75% completed. So I'll give it another 10 seconds or so for those who haven't answered. I will say this, if you don't happen to see the poll, you may be in full screen mode. So you're gonna have to come out of full screen, and then you'll be able to see the question there.
Okay.
So Joan, currently we're at 70% say yes and 30% say no.
Okay. And then we have one more poll to come up before we get started.
Launching that one now.
What do you think is the most pressing need facing your organization? And if you can go ahead and let me know that, we're gonna dispel some myths as we go forward and talk about things that really do work.
We're at about 50% collected, so we'll give it a few more seconds. Again, if you are in full screen mode, just go ahead and get out of there. You'll be able to see the poll if you're having issues seeing it. Joan, we're split 50-50 with program development, and we just need more money.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. And basically what I expected. Let's get out of there and get going. And I'm ready for the next slide, Peter, when you are. Okay, so you already know this because 70% of you either work at or are on the board of a nonprofit. But for those that don't, why are we talking about nonprofits? It's good people doing good things, and that's important. But nonprofits are very important in terms of our economy in California. We're 15% of the GDP. We employ 7% of the workforce. And if you think about, most nonprofits use a lot of contractors as well. We have a lot of people that we're supporting. And yes, we do lovely things in the community. And we can keep going, Peter. But nonprofits play an important role in our community. So we all know that pre-pandemic, right? There were a lot of factors driving our sector, and we were all already dealing with a lot in terms of raising money. And why is it important to raise money? Well, just like Coca-Cola needs to sell Coca-Cola, nonprofits need money to do what they need to do. And so the philanthropy side, which is the side that gives the money, is a very important driving piece of how that nonprofit sector works. So if you think about a nonprofit, right, who's maybe a food bank or something, and then you think about Coca-Cola, the thing that is interesting is that nonprofits tend to function less as a business. But the truth is that there are some business practices that could make a big difference in how successful nonprofits are. So I'm going to intersperse that through our conversation. So before the pandemic, in California, there were way too many nonprofits. There were a lot of duplicate organizations. There was not enough money to support all of them. And the funders were feeling a lot of stress in terms of being overwhelmed with asks from people who probably didn't fit their mission, but mostly they were already funding someone who did that thing. And so I would go to I know a lot of the funders in LA. They don't give because of me, by the way. They give because of your mission and your organization. But I went to a lot of sessions where you meet the funders and they would all say the same thing. I get too many phone calls. I get too many emails. We had to shut down my email. It was so overwhelmed. So many people asking us for money, and way too many of you have the same mission. So what the response to that was what the funders called strategic philanthropy. What that really means is, don't call us, we will call you. And what the funders were saying was, we know what we need to do, and it had moved from about 25% to over 50% when Madoff happened, right? So in 2008, about 50% of the philanthropy money in Los Angeles was directed by the funder, and they did not accept any applications from anybody. And they call it no unsolicited proposals. That's the language that they use. So this is pre-pandemic. So we're already kind of in a tight situation where we're all trying to find money, and we're not all getting money. And so the funding priorities at that time were religion, education, and then human services is the food bank, sheltering the homeless, domestic violence, providing health care to people, tutoring for kids in low-income schools. So that was sort of heading toward the bottom of the pile, and behind those are arts and animals, right? And so religion was, people gave to their churches and synagogues and mosques and everything else. And then education is, people gave to their alma maters. And so you can see that once you get through all of that, there's very little money left when you start getting into taking care of people. So the people that I just called them winners for fun, were getting the money, frankly. The organizations that were really doing really, really well were people that had very solid programs, more unique than others, right? Or they were doing the best in that area. So the one I like to use as an example is Make-A-Wish. Make-A-Wish exists, they're enormous, they do a great job, they've really figured out how to do those wishes for sick kids. But what happens is that a lot of people who have a child who's ill, and when they come out of it, they think, I don't want anyone to have to go through that. I'm going to do wishes for sick kids. And somehow they don't know that Make-A-Wish is already doing them, and they start their own Make-A-Wish, except they call it Susie's Wish or Henry's Heart or something like that. And it's something that I saw a lot when I worked for a nonprofit that helped sick children. And in about 5 years later, they've run out of all their lists. They've done everything they can. They're exhausted, and they can't continue to run the organization. And many of them would approach my organization and say, can you guys take us on or give us money or do something so we can keep going? And it's just really sad to see that happening. And if they'd known that there were already, 6 Make-A-Wish chapters in Los Angeles or whatever it is, they would have done something else for parents who are struggling with sick children. So that's where when I talk about duplication, that's what I kind of mean. So people who were getting money had a solid mission. They had professional staff. Their executive director was seasoned, knew their job, did it. They had a board that was very well developed and did their job well. And they had programs that were based on evidence and had outcomes that showed results. And they were usually larger and stable because the philanthropists were very risk averse. 80% of all the money came from people. And that is why people who give to their mosque or church and their alma mater, that's why those are the top two. 80% of the money came from people. And about 26% came from wealthy people. And then 2% was corporate. And it had been 7% around the time of Madoff, which was about 2008, but it had dropped down to 2%. So basically most fundraisers like me, we're only looking at a handful of corporate donors that worked with nonprofits in a way that wasn't related to volunteering or something like that. And then 18% was foundation, which has stayed pretty steady. We were seeing a lot more young people starting their own foundations who were wealthy, high net worth people, but were younger, and they gave in different ways. They chose their organizations from the front. They said, we want to change, we want clean water in Africa, whatever it is, and we know which organizations are doing that, and we're going to partner with them. So they weren't really part of the philanthropy in California. The declining event returns, donor fatigue around galas, gala fatigue, honorees not wanting to be honored, and working so hard to get those galas done, and then making, maybe what, 50% of, and having to pay the rest of it in costs to put that gala on, and that wouldn't even count the human capital. And then really characterized many of the nonprofits, especially in Los Angeles, were characterized by a lack of diversity, and really on the board side, which is critical, frankly, to your fundraising. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So this was pre-pandemic. We were already kind of having a lot of tension in the sector, the nonprofit sector, which is what it's called. And we're going to keep going on the slides. So what happened during COVID? Society shut down. Everybody's in their house working by themselves. Nonprofits had to figure out, how are we going to deliver our mission by Zoom? Or if we're the food bank, how are we going to do all the sanitation that needs to be done? But everybody had to really think fast and figure out how they were going to keep going and keep operating. And the funders in Los Angeles and in California were absolutely flooded with requests. Every executive director and development director said, we got to get an ask out in front of everybody in the whole wide world because we are going to be in trouble because we had to cancel our gala. Spring is when a huge number of the galas occur all the way across our state. And when I had a gala scheduled the day after they shut down California. So that organization, luckily, we treated it all as major gifts and everybody let us keep the money. But many organizations, their galas were later in the spring and they weren't going to get that money. So people had to figure out, what are we going to do? So they're thinking Zoom gala, they're flooding the foundations. I had calls with all of the foundations that I had relationships with because I wanted to find out what the trends were and what was happening and how it would affect the people that I work for. And they were all saying to me, Joan, we just don't even know what to do anymore because we have so many requests coming in. One of the biggest foundations in LA said to me, keep an eye out for an announcement. Something's coming. We're not going to accept any more applications. We have 200,000 that came in the last couple of weeks, and we don't even have enough people to read them all. And that foundation, I'm going to tell you what they decided later. While all of this is going on, and by the way, every development director was sending an email out to their people and other lists and anybody they could find. So we're all, even me, and I'm a fundraiser, I'm being flooded with requests through my email for giving, and the foundations are being overwhelmed with requests for giving. And so at the same time, we have a social justice movement going on worldwide, where a certain population in our society is saying, we need some attention here. And that is really on philanthropy, right? That's the job of the nonprofit world, is to help give people a leg up and improve the human experience. And so the philanthropists, the people who give money on their own, people who have family foundations, and certainly the foundations in Los Angeles have to pay attention to this and figure out, how are we going to be involved with this while we're already being overwhelmed with requests from the organizations that already exist. One of the things that I noticed very much was, I'm sure everybody saw all these COVID relief, and everybody's applying for this COVID relief. I would have to say, if you were not already known in Los Angeles to the foundations, you were not going to get any of that COVID relief money, and even if you were. But if you were a newer, younger organization, and there was somebody much bigger than you that was already doing that work, they were going to get that money. And so the funds were not really broadly disseminated. And I have a very good example. The LA Arts Recovery, there was, they had enough money to give a lot of organizations a lot of money, and 400 organizations applied. Only 90 got money, which meant each one of those got about $500,000, but they didn't spread the money out among the other people. You know, the way the decisions are made, the money was not broadly disseminated. So now we have nonprofits who have even less money, are trying to get everything they can. Society is shut down and they're all trying to get everybody interested in their programs and what they're doing. And in the meantime, we have a whole sector of the society saying, hey, philanthropists, we need a lot more from you too. And so and basic needs were exacerbated at the same time, meaning you had more people without food because people lost their jobs, and you did more people that needed rent relief because they lost their jobs. And so now we have a lot of, and we're going to go to the next slide, Peter. So we have a lot of pressure on our sector. So where did we end up? And I just went to a meeting last week with several of the funders in Los Angeles, and frankly, some new organizations that were very interesting. So here's where we are now. They're not calling it strategic philanthropy anymore. They're now calling it trust philanthropy. And my personal estimate would be between 60 and 75% of the wealth that gets distributed is being distributed this way. And what it means is that we in the nonprofit sector who raise money, we need to trust that the philanthropy side will choose the right people to do the programs that they want to do. And that is basically it. They are going to choose. And so the big foundation that I talked about, that got 200,000 proposals, I saw her last week, and she said, we shut down, we stopped taking applications from anyone. We switched our mission completely to social justice. And doing social justice work, we want to improve, we want to eliminate discrimination, systemic discrimination for African Americans in our community. But to do that, we want to work with grassroots organizations in the African American community, run by people from the African American community who know what to do to fix the African American community. And she said, we admit that some of those organizations have not been around for very long, and we admit that some of them are still figuring out what they're going to do, and we admit that we're going to take risks and figure it out. But we don't want to, it meant, and she said it very clearly, and they're a very large funder in Los Angeles, she said it meant a lot of people are not getting money from us anymore. But we need to do what we need to do to fix this problem in our society. 5 large California foundations did the exact same thing at the same time. And so we can look at that all sorts of ways, but the truth is it's a need in our community that's being addressed, but it means that if you were doing something else, somewhere else, you may not be a fit for these organizations anymore, and you may not be one of the 10 or 14 that they're working with, or 20 or whatever it is. So that means that a lot of organizations are now going to be looking for money elsewhere. Individual giving during this time went to 86% from 80%. And the percentage of high net worth giving is 46% versus 12. That means that people who gave money personally or through their family foundations, they decided they upped. A lot of people dipped into their endowments. Some of the foundations did, but it was mostly high net worth people, or high net worth people that were going to make bequests gave the money anyway. Now that was driven by large gifts from younger people who generally like to drive the bus themselves, right? They want to choose where the money's going to go and how it's going to be done, and they want to be way more involved in their philanthropy. So the winners, the people who are getting money now, and think about how different this is. And the foundation in LA that I met with last week, she said, the people we're applying to, Joan, they're not professional fundraisers like you. They don't have a certification in grant writing. They haven't done their training at Indiana University in major gifts. They don't have an MBA. They can't do a financial analysis. She said, we're not looking for that. And so she said, we had to change how we accept applications, and we had to change how we work with foundations. But all of this is changing the values, right? And the skills needed, and what's needed to work in the nonprofit community. And so things are moving very differently. grassroots organizations who have leadership from their own community and who are in advocacy and organizing, which is where the big organizations and funders in LA are going to, right? California Endowment, they are working with the organizers to figure out who the organizations they should, which organizations they should support. So is Liberty Hill Foundation. The California Wellness Foundation is doing the same thing, and the Healthcare Foundation. They want a diverse staff and board. And those are the people that are getting the money, that have diverse staff and board. The people you're serving should look a lot like the people who are working there, and should look a lot like the people you have on the board. And anybody who did not have a relationship with the foundations prior to all this change will not build one, because there really are only a handful of organizations, especially in Los Angeles, that have not moved this way. And so it really changes how people need to do their fundraising. And funders openly admit they are taking risks, helping their organizations way more, getting way more involved and measuring results. And then they're going to figure out where to go from there. And so individual giving has greatly increased, but with more donor involvement. And we'll go to the next slide now, Peter. But this has really changed how we, as the professional, right, staff in our organizations and leaders in the community and the executive directors with a lot of experience, we're going to have to be a little more nimble and figure out what we're going to do about things. And so this is where we are right now. We are having a lot of disillusions and mergers. Well, I already said that we're way too many nonprofits. So for me, this is the correction that's been coming for some time. It's just me as a consultant who works with a lot of organizations and spends a lot of time trying to look at things more broadly. This is what I see needed to happen for some time. I have had in the last year about 12 people come to me and say, we just don't know what we're going to do. And I looked at their numbers and said, find somebody who's complementary to you and merge. And so people are merging so that they can save their programs. And it means they have to let go of their ego and their dream and all the things that they wanted to do. But maybe they can get themselves associated with the organization they merged with and still do what they want to do with their program. There have been some disillusions. Some organizations have just said, you know what, we just can't make it go. And some of them I had to agree with, unfortunately. They were someone who started up something somebody already was doing. It doesn't always work out well. Foundation relationships needed to be in place prior to COVID. If you just suddenly decided you were going to approach the Parsons Foundation, after COVID started, they're going to be looking at people they already funded, even though they say they don't. The losers now who are not going to get money, arts is first, animals is second, legacy, people big, huge government funded that used to get some foundation support, I am seeing that they are not anymore. People, that isn't what the big funders are looking for. They don't want these big, solid people that, kind of keep going the way they've already been going. They don't want that. They want people who are innovative and creative and taking chances. And then we had a sea change in what's valued in nonprofits, in how it works in nonprofits, and what the beliefs are about how things should be in nonprofits. And so, we're gonna go to the next slide, Peter. I'm sorry, I'm used to doing my own slides. What are we gonna do about it? So I'm gonna give you a little poll here that Peter's gonna put up, and it's gonna give us some information.
All right, we're gonna launch it right now.
Okay, thanks, Peter. If you could just do the poll, and then we're gonna look at the results, and we're gonna talk about whether you need more money, better programs, and how you do fundraising.
Give it a couple more seconds, we're almost there. All right, Joan, so we're at about 60-40. So 60% say the board of directors, and then 40% say ask a lot of people, you'll eventually find
The right ones. Great. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So we're going to talk about it, and we can just keep going, Peter. Thank you. So the first thing you have to do, and hopefully during COVID, if you are a nonprofit organization, you figured out how to keep your programs going, whether you were giving food away or providing art programs or whatever it was. And I know some very clever people who are smaller organizations that did better during COVID with fundraising, and it was because of the way they respond. They were able to respond and really leverage their assets. And so the fundraisers in the room know that fundraising is a leveraging of your assets. And the biggest asset you have is the board of directors and the leadership of your organization, and it's critical to the success of your fundraising. So the first thing I think everybody should look at, rather than just running around blasting things out all over the place, is to look at your organization very carefully, make sure you're optimized for fundraising. And of course, in order to optimize for fundraising, you need good leadership. The ED and the board are the most critical piece of fundraising. So you need a unique, urgent mission. It doesn't mean that you're the only one doing wishes, right? But it might mean that you let somebody else do the wishes in one part of your county, and then you do the wishes in the other part of the county. Or you're the food bank, but you don't house people, but you partner with the guys that house people, because you all need to help, you're helping the same audience. You want to make sure that you're all doing it collaboratively. So you need a unique, urgent mission, but you might have your urgent mission in one part of the place, and someone else might have the same urgent mission in another part geographically, but you are the only one in your geographic area doing what you're doing. And it cannot be that it's just an aspect of what you're doing. Well, we do it better because it has to be that you have a unique, urgent mission. You have to ensure the financial health of your organization. And if you don't have it, you have to get there somehow. And fundraising is only one part of it. We all know there's costs. And so whether it's layoffs or furloughs, or you stop doing one thing for a while, or put something on pause so that you can keep going, or you take pay cuts, whatever it is, but you have to ensure your financial health. If you cannot do one or two, not one and two, one or two of these things, you need to consider a merger. Because the funders that I know, the first thing they look at is your financials. And if they're not in order, they will not look at you at all. So you won't get past the LOI stage, nor even get invited to submit a proposal. Collaboration is a really big thing right now. So people who are doing food banks, they are partnering up with the people who provide the shelter, and they are partnering up with the people who provide the healthcare, because the people who have shelters need their people to get healthcare somewhere and need them to eat. And so people are getting way more collaborative. Collaboration has been key in nonprofit since I joined the nonprofit sector 20 years ago, and it is critical now. So not collaboration for the sake of it, but where it makes sense. Somebody who's complementary to what you're doing, and it helps you all do a better job for the people you're serving. Have a strategic plan. It doesn't have to be fancy, expensive, anything, but have a strategic plan that you talk about all the time in every meeting that you have. Well, our strategic plan calls for us to do this, and that's a part of it, and that's not. It drives how you make decisions, where you put resources. Have a strategic plan and a fundraising plan that supports it. The leadership of your organization are critical. We're going to talk about that on the next slide, which we're ready to go to. Okay, adopt best practices. All the EDs and the fundraisers who are on this call right now know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't have best practices in place in your organization, the foundations who are left and will accept applications from you are not going to fund you. So you have to have diversity. You have to have people in your organization that reflect and represent the people you serve. Board development, everybody knows this. You have to have a give-get, and it has to be enforced. You cannot have anyone on your board who is exempt. You have to have term limits, and they have to be enforced. No one can be exempt, even your founder. And again, you need your diversity. I am a big fan of audits. I think organizations, knowing that funders look at your numbers first, if you've got an audit that you can send in with your LOI or whatever it is, if you have 500,000 and above in revenue every year, you need to do an audit. You can get a cheap one and it'll still be good, but you cannot say, oh, we have $1 million, but we don't have to do an audit. Well, there's a lot of people that won't look at you. And even if they say they do, they're going to give the guy with the audit the money before you. Your programs need to be based in some sort of research. If you are providing housing in a certain way, if you're providing domestic violence care for women in a certain way. You need to have programs that are based in research. So research has found that providing counseling quickly helps families do better later. And then you need to measure that and make sure that your outcomes support your evidence-based programs. We're ready to go, Peter. And then develop a fundraising plan. I always start with who you got. Who do you have in your database? Who's in there? Who haven't you heard from in a while? Who hasn't heard from you in a while? Figure that out and what you're going to do with that first. Put it into tiers. Come up with a really good stewardship plan where people feel thanked and they feel engaged in your organization and they feel informed. If they haven't talked to your ED in a long time and they're one of your major donors, set up a time for them to get updated over Zoom probably, but still. Beef up your anemic area. So you do great and match yourself up, right? Why do corporations give? Why do foundations give? You are matching your mission with other people and what they want. Corporations want volunteering. If you have volunteering, start looking at some corporations. Beef up your anemic area. So let's pretend you have a huge major giving program. You have all these high net worth people giving you money. What's the next place to go? Bequests. Bequests were the largest growth area of giving last year. And it's a big, got all these baby boomers. You know, it's time to get them and have them put you in their will. And if you need help with that, the California Community Foundation has fantastic materials. All you have to do is put your logo on them, by the way, and has a fantastic little checklist for what you need to do to set up a bequest program. And it works. It's very good. This is something that I have noticed with every organization I have ever had to, rescue and fix, right? Because I've been an interim ED about 5 or 6 times, and I've put organizations back together that were really messed up. They always use the interns for the fundraising because nobody else wants to do it. You need experts finding your prospects. Don't send an intern on the internet because you're young and they're good at technology to find you prospects. Someone who has fundraising skills, knows what you're looking for, should be doing all your prospecting. Use the interns for data input and extraction, right? That's what they're good for. Next slide. And then what is the board's role? The board's role is huge. And so if you are a board member, make sure that your board, every single person on your board gives money, a check of some amount that is significant to them. Even if they bring in a huge chunk of money from their company, they need to write a personal check of some amount. Make sure term limits are enforced and that you have a policy on the give-get. Your board should provide links to donors. Every board meeting you have, take in a list of donors that you would like to, and this is the only way around the don't call us, we'll call you thing, right? If all these foundations, if one is a great fit with you, go to your board meeting with a list of their board members and say, who knows one of these people that we could have a conversation with and discuss whether we're a fit and if they would accept something from us. I have done that for 2 brand new donors over the last 2 months. We've already had 2 conversations and been accepted by both of them. And we have 2 more conversations scheduled. And I believe we will be accepted by both of them. And what was it? A board member knew somebody who knew somebody, and we got in there and had a conversation. So that is a really important way to bring yourself new funders and givers. And if it's not, it helps get your name out more. Every board member should meet, I think, with the development director and ED to talk about what their personal fundraising plan is for the organization. How are they going to bring money into the organization? It's just a leveraging of their assets. It's not scary. It's not to frighten people. Board members should be offering to chair some sort of campaign. And I think it is a board member's responsibility to sit in meetings and keep everybody focused on fundraising. Why? Because fundraising is critical to the long-term growth of the organization. We're going to go to one more slide. Things to avoid. Don't change your mission. Don't change your mission to social justice. If you have a component of your mission that is social justice, figure out how you're going to get yourself in front of the people who are doing it, right? And that's where you go back to getting a list of board members in front of your board. Applying to everything is a disaster and makes you look terrible. Fit matters. You're applying to people who are strategically aligned with what you're trying to do. So blasting out emails doesn't work either. Very few organizations can have an administrative ED. Most EDs need to be the lead fundraiser who is way out in front, partnered with the development director and the board, and everybody's working collaboratively to bring money in. That is what works. Government boards don't work. Governance, right? Most boards, almost all boards have to be fundraising boards. And that is a best practice that is in you know, the training program that Wallace Annenberg put together through the Annenberg Foundation. Don't assume you're unique if you're on the board, right? Or even if you work there. People start up all the time, and I've seen them just get in a much better place than somebody who's already doing the same thing. Somebody else is out there doing what you're doing. And keeping an eye, right? If you ran Coca-Cola, you'd keep an eye on the competition. Keep an eye on the competition. And the boards tend to make emotional decisions that result in disasters. So board members need to stay checked in right in their little business suit and business mindset, and treat the organization like a business. So we're going to go to the next slide. And I'm going to talk about the person who said, or the idea of what do we really need? Do we just need more money? Well, you need more money, but organizations that need more money usually need to tune up before they go. Just saying that usually there's something at the top level at the board that's not as functional as it could be, or some best practices that could be put in place. So before you go doing that, and then if you need help with programs, you can bring in a consultant to help you do that, and it would probably cost a lot less than doing other things. And so the answer is not just ask everybody. The answer is make sure your board is optimized, and then go out and ask everybody you possibly can, but if they are a strategic fit with your organization. And so we're going to go to questions. I think we have about 2 minutes. Hopefully Peter will let me have a couple minutes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joan. I'm going to join you back up on screen. Thank you for all that. And we'll go ahead and leave this slide up as we do questions, just in case anybody needs a minute to take down your contact details and everything. But we do have a few questions. The first one I want to start with is only in timing, because you just had it on the slide before on what to avoid. You know, and one of the things was you touched on avoid blasting emails out with like urgent subject lines or whatever. So to that point is, how often should my organization send out an email?
Well, I'll tell you that during the pandemic, and unfortunately it's continued, I receive at least two emails a week from about 5 different organizations. These are really big organizations in LA that should know better, right? I don't read any of them. They all say, by tomorrow, we need to have, you know, urgent, and it can't be that urgent every day. And so I think there's a balance between, right, doing that and planning ahead, which I'm sure all the people on this call know. You have a fundraising plan, you know you're going to do 3 appeals every year. One's in the spring, one is back to school, and one is the holidays, whatever it is. And part of that appeal is that you send emails out over a 4-week or a 6-week or whatever it is period. And I think we all kind of used to do newsletters, and then I think we kind of all figured out nobody bothers to read them anymore. So there's no rule hard and fast, but I definitely wouldn't even once a week send emails out to people asking for money. You're hitting the same people up week after week. I would have your campaigns planned, and you know, most donors know, oh, they're going to send me something at the end of the year. I'm going to wait for that. Or I always give to the back to school campaign because they're buying backpacks for kids, whatever it is. They have it make sense for your organization and frankly for the work that you have to do, because while you're sitting there blasting all these emails around, you could be on Zoom with some of your donors, getting them to give you more money.
Joan, just on that topic is kind of what would be the best approach if, you know, for example, I'm on a nonprofit and I know you're you're a supporter and a donor of my nonprofit. You know, is there a way to, I guess, cross that line to where I know you're friends with this other person who is also a donor and I want to get them in? Is there a way to approach that, you know, to say, hey, Joan, can you make the introduction, or can I give you my sponsorship flyer and you present it to them? I mean, what's kind of the best approach for that?
Depends on the person and your relationship with them. So I'm going to tell you my 2 scenarios. So I had a major giver lady for one of the organizations I work for, and she was their biggest donor, and she was a fabulous lady. And so we were having an event at a really wealthy, high net worth person's house that was a celebrity, and I knew she would want to go. So I called her up and said, I just want you to come. I don't want you to buy tickets or sponsor. You know, you're so good to us. She showed up with a car full of her rich friends. And she said, you guys, you all need to talk to Joan, right? So that was, and I knew knowing her, I knew her really well, and I knew that she would do that. She also brought me a giant check. So the other way that I did it is I'm working with an organization now, and it's a music organization, and the people all perform. And so their biggest donor is on their board, and I needed her to introduce me to somebody, and I knew she would know them. And so I sent an email and said, do you have 10 minutes? And I just asked her flat out, because wealthy people usually, I'm just sorry, but in general, they usually know way more than I do, right? And they know I want something. So rather than beating around the bush or being wiggy about it, I just called her up on the phone and said, I have been trying to get to this for this reason. And she found the person. I already had a phone call with him. So it depends on who it is and what it's like. She was so involved in the mission and such a big part of the organization that I just thought, she's a board member and it's her job to do this. So I'm gonna call her up and ask her to do it. But the other lady, I knew she was a celebrity hound, and if I got her at that person's house, she'd, do something for me, and she did.
Yeah, okay. Joan, in regards to kind of the year that we've obviously all had, and I think not just with nonprofits, obviously, but specifically to nonprofits who look to fundraising, right, as their main source of revenue, is how can a nonprofit kind of make up for the canceled events? I mean, what are some, I don't know if there are different types of programs or, campaigns. I mean, what's kind of a good go-to way to sort of make up for what was lost?
There's choices. So I think it depends on your organization and your mission and your donors, what they're going to respond to. And you need to think about that very, 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 and frankly, I didn't make that decision myself for the one I had to cancel. And I had another one that we couldn't do. So what we did for the first one was, it was all major gifts. It was all high net worth people. And I called every single one of them individually. Yes, I did, after we canceled, and had a conversation, and they all let us keep the money. So then we didn't have to do anything else. And so we didn't have to think about replacing it. So then the other event, we thought we had a substance to that event that is part of our community, right? It was a police recognition event. And so we said, who wouldn't come to the Zoom police recognition event? And so we did it anyway. But the people that gave to that gave because of that. And so it was an hour, and we got more people than we normally did for the normal thing. And then I have a choir that really had to do it online. And what they did was, they didn't charge people. They did it for free and then took donations. They made more than, wow, because they were giving something for free to people. It was I told them I didn't think it was a good idea, but I was wrong, because they knew their donors better. And they knew that most of their donors were tied to the people singing in the choir. And so they did really well. So I wouldn't run and do a Zoom thing, because we're all getting invited to wine tastings and Zoom this and Zoom that. We all know there's Zoom fatigue. And I wouldn't run to just do an appeal and think everybody's going to read it and look at it. I would think very clearly about who we usually invite and get, and how you want to keep those people engaged. And I have seen people be very clever, but one person I know just did an auction. They got a bunch of really cool stuff. They put it up on Charity Buzz and eBay, and they did well. They made a couple $100,000. So it doesn't, but my God, I've been invited to 62,000 wine tastings in the last year. And I go and I hit the little video no button and go do something else. How much wine can you drink? So you have to think about your people, and it's all about you and your people and what's going to be a better fit for them.
But did you make it to all 62,000 Zoom wines?
Unbelievably enough, I started saying no. I just couldn't do one more.
Joan, with that, I guess kind of we're sort of in this weird position now, right? Because we see light at the end of the tunnel. Everyone is looking forward to this June 15th date. Slowly, some announcements are coming out. Do you kind of, in your opinion, would you think rather than putting another Zoom event or whatever it may be, I mean, is this probably a better time for probably a nonprofit to step back? I know you're saying don't bombard people with e-blasts, but put an email of like hey, we're here, we're taking this time to kind of regroup, revamp, and then launch your first in-person event, or does that kill momentum?
No, people want to go out. People want to go out. That's what I'm seeing. People want to get out of their houses and they want to do something. They don't want to go back to rubber chicken dinners. I would do a clever, creative, maybe outdoor. One of my clients is doing an event in the fall. You know, creative, clever, outdoor, fun, something really fun that people can do a wine and painting event or something like that. And whoever paints the cutest thing gets, you know, have a contest about what you paint, whatever it is, but just something clever and fun for people to enjoy, not just sitting in a room watching people walk across the stage. I think people want to get out, and that's why, you know, when we had our conversation about what are we going to do with the policeman's event this year, I said, people want to be in the room with the chief of police giving out awards to people. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But we'll have less people in the room, but that way you get to fight over who gets to come.
There you go. And obviously, Joan, from the start of your presentation to the end and everything that we've been asking comes, you know, it all has to do with your donors when it comes to fundraising. Is how do we treat new and current donors given, you know, the response to COVID-19 and how I guess each nonprofit is handling their efforts during this time? You know, what's kind of a good approach to just, whether it be again an old donor, a longtime supporter, or, you know, a new donor that maybe you made that connection February of 2020 and then March the world shut down and you didn't have a chance to really engage?
So I would get the database out and look at everybody that's in there, absolutely every single person and how much they've given. And no matter how long they've been around, people love to be thanked. It is, first of all, an excellent way to engage your board. I would put them all in a tier. This person's been around forever. They've given us a ton of money. They should get a phone call from the chair of the board saying, hi, you're the best person in the whole wide world. We just wanted you to know that. And then the tiers would just go from there, from the guy that gives $10 to the guy that one time or whatever it was. But I would have a stewardship plan and I would enforce it. So of course everybody gets their letter or whatever it is, but I would have tiers of how much people have given. It depends on what your base looks like, and I would really enforce it. Every board meeting, every board member, we're going to get a list of people they're going to send an email to, sign a letter to, write a card to, call on the phone and say thank you. And I would put a tier in there where it's the ED doing that, and I would put a tier in there where the ED is calling people up. And one of the best things that you can do with especially higher net worth people is set up coffee with the ED over Zoom. Not everybody wants to be in person, not everybody's vaccinated, but so you can say to somebody, we'd like to give you an update on where we are. We're just gonna have a phone call about what we're doing. It's 20 minutes with our executive director, and we're gonna send you a little box of tea to choose from. And you can do stuff like that, or your ED could meet them for lunch outside somewhere. But I would start hooking up with people. I know one person that's done very, very well selling people over Zoom. It's not uncomfortable for me, but sometimes I wonder if it is for the donors. But I would definitely start hooking up with your donors one-on-one and talking to them. I have a little lady that I help with her foundation, and they give away about $200,000 a year. It's pretty small. She saves on her phone all the people who call her and say thank you after they give money, and she plays them for me over and over and over and over again. People like to be thanked and recognized, and I would keep because it's not about what you want from them. It's about bringing them more into your organization. Figure out a way you can give them a tour of your new building. Figure out a way you can, help them learn more about what you're doing, and not just with emails, because that 86-year-old lady, believe me, she doesn't read all her emails.
Gotcha.
No, don't forget, there's still a ton of money at that level. There's a lot of 89-year-old people who have foundations.
They've got the money, but they may not have email access, so we got to think outside the box.
Got to think outside the box, and that their hearing is a little. So remember, when you call them, they can't hear that well.
No, and I think that's a perfect closer, Joan. So I do want to thank you for taking the time being here with us and sharing all this information. For those of you who had missed it, we had Joan, I think it was last year, just kind of as everything started, and we got a little bit of a glimpse. She spoke a little bit about fundraising, and obviously that was a whole different world then. Things have changed, so we appreciate you being back, and we appreciate you taking the time. Again, on behalf of the Chamber, the full board, Holly, our nonprofit council chair, thanks for taking the time. And we want to thank everybody else for being here as well. If we didn't get to your questions, please, feel free to reach out to me. Joan's contact details here again. if you want to reach directly out to her, and we'd be more than happy to help. But with that, as always, be safe, be healthy, and we're almost there, June 15th. So we'll see what it looks like. So hopefully we'll be able to see everybody in person soon. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for having me. And thank you everyone for your attention.